Welcome to Entry Point Faith, where every week we find fresh meaning in the world so you can find faith your way. This week's message is titled, Wait, What?
A young woman named Emily tells us the following story. When I was young, my father said to me, "Knowledge is power. Francis Bacon." I understood it as knowledge is power. France is bacon. For more than a decade, I wondered over the meaning of that second part and what was the surreal linkage between the two phrases. If I said the quotation to someone, "Knowledge is power, France is bacon," they nodded knowingly. Or someone else might say, "Knowledge is power," and I would finish the quotation, "France is bacon." And they wouldn't look at me like I'd said something very odd, but would thoughtfully agree. I did ask a teacher, what does "knowledge is power, France is bacon" mean? And I got a full 10-minute explanation of the knowledge is power bit, but nothing on France is bacon. When I prompted further explanation by saying, "France is bacon?" with a questioning tone, she just said, "Yes." At 12, I didn't have the confidence to press it further. I just accepted it as something I'd never understand. It wasn't until years later, when I saw it written down, that I finally understood. Knowledge is power. Francis Bacon. Emily, what a great example of the capacity that we all have for holding on to misunderstandings and even sharing them with other people. France is Bacon is now one of my favorite stories, and when I read it several months ago, it became the inspiration for today's message. Many of us walk around with the wrong song lyrics in our heads. For example, instead of singing, "I can see clearly now, the rain is gone," some people sing, "I can see clearly now, Lorraine is gone." Instead of "Hold me closer, tiny dancer," we sometimes hear, "Hold me closer, Tony Danza." When my oldest son was about 3 years old, the Supertramp song, "Take the Long Way Home," was very popular, and it was one of our favorite songs. When he would sing along with it, he always would drop the H from the word home and end up sounding like a kid from Liverpool. "Take the long way home. Take the long way home." A woman named Nina shares this experience. As a singer, I sing at many funerals, and I was recently asked by a funeral director to sing at a graveside service for a homeless man. He had no family or friends, so the service was to be at a pauper's cemetery. As I was not familiar with the area, I got lost. My GPS navigation lost its signal, and I was doing my best to try to follow the very vague verbal descriptions and directions that I was given. I arrived an hour late, and I saw that the funeral guy had evidently gone and the hearse was nowhere in sight. There were only diggers and crew left, and they were eating lunch. I felt badly, but I apologized to the guys for being late. I went to the side of the grave, and I looked down, and the vault lid was already in place. I didn't know what else to do, so I started to sing. The workers put down their lunch and began to gather around. I sang my heart and soul out for this man with no family or friends. As I sang "Amazing Grace," the workers began to weep. They wept, I wept, we all wept together. And when I finished, I prayed a benediction and started for my car. My head hung low, but my heart so full. As I opened the door to my car, I overheard one of the workers say, "I've never seen nothing like this before, and I've been putting in septic tanks for 20 years. We have all misread the room, or showed up at the wrong place, or heard things incorrectly. And while that causes confusion and gives us some laughs when we realize our errors, those are fairly harmless experiences for us. We end up embarrassed or inconvenienced, but we don't cause harm or lasting damage. It's when the misinterpretation and the misunderstanding involves our feelings about other people that we are venturing into murky water. Because when we do that, when we misunderstand the nature and the motivations and the character of other people, we land right in the middle of the land of assumptions. We take what we believe to be true of one person, and then we make assumptions about other people who are like that one person. It is a miscommunication that ends in judgment. Now, assumptions are part of the way we reason. We have to make them from time to time in order to get through the day. Assumptions are necessary. I assume that the doors of this elevator that I am standing in front of are going to open very much like other elevators that I have stood in front of. That is a logical assumption about the way elevator doors function. But when it comes to making assumptions and judgments about people, it's a very tricky thing. In the book, The Austere Academy, Lemony Snicket says, assumptions are dangerous things to make. And like all dangerous things to make, bombs, for instance, or strawberry shortcake, if you make even the tiniest mistake, you can find yourself in terrible trouble. We think we know exactly what's going on, or we see something and then we add to it with our imaginations. And pretty soon we have a whole backstory and a feature film rolling through our brain. The danger comes when we start to believe our creation, and it affects how we behave around that person. So why do we do this? Why do we make assumptions and judgments? Dr. Maria Sirota writes, I think that it's part of human nature to base our understanding of other people and the world, not just on the facts we observe, but to a greater or lesser extent on what's going on inside of us, psychologically. In past years, I have spoken about a book entitled The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. This book suggests that as we grow up in our homes, we have been domesticated by a series of rewards and punishments. If we follow the rules of our parents, we are then seen to be good. If we don't follow their rules, we feel and are viewed and labeled bad. Mr. Ruiz doesn't like the end result. He feels that we then enter adulthood with shame and guilt. Instead, he proposes, we enter into 4 agreements that will result in healthier, happier living. The 4 agreements transcend social conditioning as we discover our personal power and learn to live with clear intent and impeccability. One of the 4 agreements is don't make assumptions. Of this agreement, Ruiz writes, the problem with making assumptions is that we believe they are the truth. We invent a whole story that's only truth for us, but we believe it. One assumption leads to another assumption. We jump to conclusions, and we take our story very personally. We make assumptions. We believe we are right about our assumptions, and then we defend our assumptions. Ruiz would like us all to begin to break the habit of making assumptions so that we can have a better life. Making assumptions backfires on us. You want to know how? Ruiz tells us that we make assumptions because we are too afraid to ask questions. We don't ask the questions that we need to ask, and then we jump to conclusions when thinking about the behaviors of others. We get so good at making assumptions that we ultimately assume everyone else sees life the way we do. We assume that others think the way we think, feel the way we feel, and judge the way we judge. Our assumptions and judgments about each other drive us far apart. We just never really know what is going on inside the other person. And if we don't ask, we are left to make those faulty assumptions. Honestly, we don't understand people that we don't agree with, people who aren't just like us a lot of the time. We make assumptions and we decide what groups of people are like, often based on the behavior of one person who is a member of that group. If a little girl with red hair hits you in the arm every day during recess, you might be tempted to believe that all little girls with red hair will hit you in the arm every day at recess. That is very similar to the error committed when we sing the wrong lyrics for so many years to a song. It is an error in understanding. It is an error in judgment that has costly ramifications. This faulty reasoning stemming from a misunderstanding causes us to cross the street when someone who doesn't look like us is headed in our direction. It causes us to make sweeping generalizations about populations of people who are different from all of us. In Matthew, we find this warning about judgment and judging other people. Don't judge, or you yourself will be judged. Your judgment on others will be the judgment you receive. If we were able to see inside the hearts and minds of people around us, we would be so much more understanding and compassionate. If we saw others the way God sees us, we would not be so likely to make assumptions or snap judgments. Instead, we would see others with the love, grace, and acceptance that God has for each one of us. Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us. As you know, Entry Point Faith relies on your financial contributions to keep everything going. If you would like to donate, please head on over to the website at entrypointchurch.org and you can click on the donate button. We meet every week at Conner Prairie in Fishers, Indiana at 10:30 a.m. Plan to arrive a little bit early so that you can become a part of the community. Join us next week when our message will be titled, Get on the Bus.